My son abandoned me on Highway 101 at midnight because he was embarrassed by me. I'm James Carter, and I honestly thought I had raised him better than this. For 4 entire years I watched Ethan systematically erase me from his life, deleting me from social media, lying about my job, treating me like I was his dirty secret. That night on the freeway, shivering in my Uber uniform while his Audi vanished into the darkness, I realized something had to change. What he didn't know was that the embarrassing Uber driver he just humiliated had enough quiet power to change his entire world. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from, because this story shows that sometimes the people we dismiss are exactly the ones who've been lifting us up all along. But to understand how we got to that moment, you need to know how a tech billionaire ended up driving for Uber. It started small. Little things that made me wonder if I'd failed as a father. Ethan graduated Stanford in December 2024. 24 years old, finance major, 91,000 Instagram followers. Handsome, ambitious, everything I'd hoped he'd become, except for one thing. He was ashamed of me. See, after I sold my company, Nexus Core Technologies, to Google in March 2019, I could have bought anything. Mansions, yachts, whatever rich guys are supposed to want. Instead, I chose something different. I wanted to understand people again. Real people. So, I started driving for Uber and DoorDash. My friends thought I'd lost my mind. James, you're worth more than most small countries. Why are you delivering tacos? But Ethan? He thought I'd lost everything. The first sign was my contact information in his phone. I used to be Dad Red Heart, then just Dad, then James Carter. Last month, I noticed it said, emergency contact number 2. Emergency contact number 2. Think about that. His Instagram told the whole story. 91,000 followers watching his perfectly curated life, designer clothes, expensive dinners, luxury trips. But scroll through 4 years of posts, hundreds of photos, and you'll find exactly 0 pictures with me. 0. He'd post photos with his girlfriend Madison, his roommates, even random bartenders. But his own father erased, like I didn't exist. When friends asked about his family, he had a rehearsed answer. My dad's a location-independent consultant. He's always traveling for work. Location-independent consultant. That's what 4 years of Stanford tuition bought me. A fake job title. The lies got more elaborate. Last summer, he told his fraternity brothers I was overseas on a long-term project in Dubai. When Madison's parents asked to meet me, he said I was dealing with a family emergency back east. I found out because Ryan Brooks, who manages her apartment building, mentioned it. Your son's girlfriend seems nice. Says you're some kind of international business consultant. Ryan works for me. I own that building. But Ethan didn't know that. The pattern was clear. At 24, he decided his Uber driver father was incompatible with his image. His social circle was wealthy Stanford kids, tech executives' children, old money families from Atherton. And me, I picked people up at the airport in a beat-up Honda Accord. He'd call Madison when he needed rides. Or his roommate Cole, or literally anyone except me. Last month, I offered to pick him up from a late study session. It was 11 p.m. Raining. Campus was empty. It's fine, Dad. I'll figure it out. Ethan, I'm literally driving around. Anyway, I'm 5 minutes away. No, really. I don't want to bother you. 2 hours later, I saw his Instagram story. He'd paid $71 for an Uber from campus to his loft, a ride I would have given him for free. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the shame. He'd rather pay a stranger $71 than be seen getting into his father's car. That's when I knew we had a problem. Not just a communication issue or college rebellion. This was something deeper. He genuinely believed I was beneath him. That my job, my lifestyle, my choices made me less worthy of his acknowledgement. What he didn't understand was that every choice I'd made since 2019 was intentional. The modest house, the simple car, the regular guy job. It wasn't because I had to. It was because I wanted to stay connected to the real world. But Ethan saw weakness where I saw wisdom. He saw failure where I saw freedom. And that night on Highway 101, he finally said what he'd been thinking all along. Let me tell you what Ethan's life actually cost. Stanford tuition, $62,000 per year. For 4 years, that's $248,000. Not including room and board, textbooks, or the study abroad program in Barcelona. His apartment. $4,900 per month. Prime location in Palo Alto, walking distance to campus, floor to ceiling. Windows, building amenities that cost more than most people's rent. I co-signed that lease. My credit, my responsibility. His credit card, $3,400 average monthly spending. Designer clothes, expensive dinners, weekend trips to LA and Vegas, all charged to an account connected to my bank. His Audi Q5, $612 monthly lease payment, plus insurance, gas, maintenance. He picked it out himself. Something that matches my aesthetic? Dad. Add it all up and Ethan's lifestyle cost me roughly $13,000 every month. $156,000 per year for 4 years. Over $600,000 to fund a life that I wasn't allowed to be part of. But the money wasn't the real cost. I could afford it. The real cost was watching my son become someone I didn't recognize. He developed this way of talking to service workers, waiters, baristas, retail employees, polite but distant, like they were background characters in his life story, the same tone he used with me. James, could you drop this off for me? Not, Dad, could you help me? Not, would you mind? Just instructions delivered with the casual authority of someone who'd never questioned where his comfort came from. Madison Hayes, his girlfriend, made it worse. 25 years old, daughter of a hedge fund legend from Atherton, the kind of girl who's never worked a regular job in her life. She encouraged Ethan's worst instincts. Babe, you shouldn't have to worry about money. That's what parents are for. Easy to say when your trust fund covers everything. But here's what bothered me most. Ethan was losing himself. The curious, empathetic kid I'd raised was disappearing, replaced by someone who measured worth in Instagram followers and designer labels. He stopped asking questions, stopped being interested in other people's stories, stopped caring about anything that didn't directly benefit his image. When I picked up passengers, immigrants, working 3 jobs, single fathers, going to night school, elderly people, trying to stay independent, I'd see what Ethan couldn't. Real resilience, real strength, the kind of character that comes from struggle, not privilege. But he was living in a bubble I'd created for him. A world where problems got solved with money, where image mattered more than substance, where people like me existed only to enable people like him. I started wondering what happens if I keep funding this? What kind of person does he become at 30, 40? What happens when he has children of his own? And what happens to me? Do I spend the rest of my life as emergency contact number 2? The embarrassing family secret he hides from his real life. That's what kept me awake at night. Not the money. I had more than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. The fear that I'd raised someone incapable of gratitude, empathy, or genuine human connection. Someone who saw love as a transaction and respect as optional. The irony was crushing. I had sold my company to spend more time with family, to prioritize relationships over work. But the wealth that was supposed to bring us closer had built a wall between us. Ethan saw my simple lifestyle as failure, not choice. He couldn't imagine that someone might value connection over status, experience over possessions. And every month I wrote those checks, I was enabling his misunderstanding, teaching him that money flows one direction, gratitude flows nowhere, and fathers exist to fund lifestyles they're not worthy to share. Something had to change. The breaking point came at the Village pub in Woodside on a Thursday night in November. Ethan had invited me to dinner. Actually invited me. I was suspicious immediately. He hadn't initiated contact in months. But I was desperate enough for connection that I said yes. 7:30, he texted, dress nice. I showed up in my best shirt and jacket, feeling hopeful for the first time in months. Maybe we could talk. Maybe he was ready to rebuild something real. Then I saw Madison's parents, Charles and Elizabeth Hayes. Old Atherton money, the kind of family that's been wealthy so long they've forgotten what earning it feels like. They were already seated at the best table studying menus that didn't list prices. Ethan waved me over with a smile that looked more like a grimace. Dad, these are Madison's parents. Charles and Elizabeth, this is my father, James. Handshakes, polite smiles, careful small talk. They asked about my work with the casual interest of people who assume everyone's job is as boring as it sounds. James is in transportation, Ethan said quickly. Transportation? Like I ran a shipping company instead of driving for Uber. The dinner progressed normally until dessert. Madison's dad asked the question that changed everything. So, James, Ethan mentioned you're in consulting. What kind of projects do you typically work on? I could feel Ethan tense beside me. This was the moment he'd been dreading. The moment his fake story met reality. Dad, he interrupted quickly. Maybe we should. Actually, I said calmly. I drive for Uber and DoorDash. The silence was deafening. Charles's expression didn't change. Wealthy people are trained to hide shock, but Elizabeth's eyebrows raised slightly. Ethan's face went red. Dad, they don't need to. It's honest work, I continued. Flexible schedule. Meet interesting people. I enjoy it. Charles recovered first. That's wonderful. Very entrepreneurial. But the damage was done. The careful social architecture Ethan had built was crumbling in real time. When the check came, $420 for 5 people, Ethan reached for his purse. With panic in his eyes. I knew that look. He'd planned for a casual dinner, not these prices. I've got it, I said, placing my credit card on the leather folder. Dad, no, I invited you. It's fine, Ethan. But it wasn't fine. As we walked to the parking garage, Ethan grabbed my arm. What the hell was that? Dinner with your girlfriend's parents? You know what I mean. Why did you tell them? Tell them what? The truth. You made me look like what? Ethan? He stopped walking. Under the harsh garage lighting, he looked younger, more vulnerable. For a second, I thought he might apologize. Instead, he said the words that revealed everything. You made me look poor. Poor? The son of a man worth more than most Fortune 500 CEOs was worried about. Looking poor. Ethan, you realize I just paid for dinner at one of the most expensive restaurants in the Bay Area. That's not the point. Then what is the point? The point is you don't understand. My reputation matters. Madison's family has connections. Real connections. And you he gestured helplessly. Like my existence was the problem. I embarrassed you by being honest. About my job. You embarrassed me by having that job. In the first place. There it was. The truth he'd been hiding for 4 years. Madison appeared, keys jingling. Ready to go, babe? Ethan looked between us, his ashamed father, his embarrassing parent, and made his choice. Dad, maybe you should we'll talk later. He walked toward Madison's Porsche, leaving me standing alone in the parking garage. But I wasn't angry. I was something else entirely. I was awake. The signs were always there. Ethan just wasn't looking. 3 days after the dinner, I was driving downtown when my phone rang. The caller ID said Google Legal. Mr. Carter, this is Lisa Park from Google's acquisition review team. We need to clarify some details about the Nexus Core earnout provisions. I pulled over to take the call. Contract language, payment schedules, tax implications, standard follow-up. From a deal worth nearly $1 billion. Everything looks good, I told them. Transfer the Q4 earnout to the same account. Perfect. That's $4.6 million for this quarter. $4.6 million. Just a quarterly bonus from a company I sold 5 years ago. When I got home, Ethan was there. He still had keys to my modest 3-bedroom house in Los Altos. He was raiding my refrigerator, probably avoiding grocery shopping. Again. Hey, Dad. Who was that on the phone? Work stuff. He glanced at my Uber driver uniform, hanging on the kitchen chair. Uber has lawyers now. Something like that. He shrugged, not interested enough to push. That was Ethan, incurious about anything that didn't directly affect him. But the calls kept coming. My old business partner, investment advisors, the property management company that handled my real estate portfolio. Ethan was present for exactly none of these conversations. He'd arrive, grab whatever he needed, and leave. Like my house was a convenience store that happened to be run by his father. Last week, he came by while I was on a video call with Dr. Laura Chen, Stanford's Dean of Development. James, the scholarship fund needs another $75,000 to cover this year's recipients. Can we count on your usual contribution? I was sitting at my kitchen table in jeans and a Stanford sweatshirt, laptop open, speaking to one of the most powerful academic administrators in the country. Ethan walked past, earbuds in, completely oblivious. After the call, he asked, "Who was that?" "Someone from Stanford." "About what?" "Scholarship stuff." Another shrug. Another missed opportunity to ask the obvious follow-up questions. Why would Stanford call me? What scholarship stuff? How do I know the dean of development? But Ethan lived in a world where he was the only Stanford student who mattered. The most obvious sign was my mail. Investment statements from Fidelity and Vanguard, property tax bills for addresses he'd never seen, invitations to charity galas and tech industry events. He'd bring in my mail sometimes, stack it on the kitchen counter, without looking. Bills and junk mail as far as he was concerned. "Dad, you get a lot of mail for someone who just drives Uber." "Everybody gets mail, Ethan. Not from Goldman Sachs. Probably just marketing." He accepted this explanation because it fit his narrative. His father was too simple to understand complicated financial products, so obviously Goldman Sachs was just trying to sell him a credit card. The Stanford parking permit was another clue. Faculty and staff only, not something you can buy or fake. I'd had it since 2019 when I joined the Computer Science Advisory Board. Ethan saw it on my dashboard once. "Dad, how did you get a Stanford parking pass?" "I do some volunteer work there." "What kind of volunteer work?" "Mentoring students, career advice." This was technically true. I did mentor students, usually entrepreneurs looking for guidance from someone who'd built and sold a successful company. But Ethan heard volunteer work and immediately lost interest. Volunteer work was what unemployed people did to feel useful. The final sign was my house itself. Modest from the outside, but if you looked closely, if Ethan had ever looked closely, you'd notice details. The security system that cost more than most cars. The fiber optic internet setup in my home office. The Tesla charging station in the garage next to my old Honda. "Dad, why do you have a Tesla charger? If you don't have a Tesla?" Planning ahead. These weren't lies. They were incomplete truths. But Ethan never asked for the complete version. He was so convinced of my failure that he couldn't see success hiding in plain sight. November 24, 2024. Ethan's Stanford graduation day. The morning started with a text. "Ceremony starts at 2 p.m. You can sit in Section K." Section K. I looked it up online. General admission, back rows, partially obstructed view. The seats they give to distant relatives and plus ones. Madison's parents got Section A, front row, reserved seating, perfect camera angles. I was emergency contact number 2 getting Section K. But I went anyway because despite everything, he was still my son and this was still his graduation day. Stanford Stadium held 50,000 people. That day. Families everywhere. Proud parents taking photos. Siblings holding "Congratulations. Graduate" signs. Grandparents crying happy tears. I found Section K and squeezed between strangers. Around me, families shared stories about their graduates. Sarah's going to Google. Michael got into Harvard Law. Emma's starting her own nonprofit. When they asked about my graduate, I said, "Ethan's in finance. He's very talented." I didn't mention that I'd been funding his talent for 4 years. The ceremony began with the usual pomp. Academic processions, honorary degrees, speeches about bright futures and limitless potential. I scanned the graduates until I found Ethan. 4th row, beaming smile. Everything I'd hoped he'd become. Except for one thing. He was actively avoiding eye contact with Section K. When they called his name, Ethan James Carter, Bachelor of Science in Finance, cum laude. I stood and cheered like every other parent. He walked across that stage like he owned it, confident, radiant, ready to conquer the world, everything I'd worked for, everything I'd hoped for. And when he reached for his diploma, he looked toward Section A and waved at Madison's parents, the people who'd known him for 8 months. Not once did he look toward Section K. After the ceremony, families gathered on the lawn for photos and celebration. I waited near the edge of the crowd, watching Ethan pose with his friends, his girlfriend, her parents, professional photographers, expensive cameras, everyone wanting to capture this perfect moment. I waited for my turn and waited. Finally, I approached the group. "Congratulations, Ethan. I'm proud of you." He turned and for a split second, I Saw panic in his eyes. Not joy at seeing his father. Panic at being seen with him. Thanks, Dad. Polite, distant, like I was a well-wishing acquaintance instead of the person who'd made this day possible. Could we get a quick photo? Actually, Dad, we're doing family photos right now. Family photos that didn't include family. Madison's father, Charles, stepped forward. James, right? Congratulations. You must be very proud. I am. Ethan tells us you've been very supportive of his education. Supportive. That's what $248,000 in tuition was called. Support. He's worked hard for this. Ethan had worked hard studying, networking, building his personal brand, everything except acknowledging who was paying for it. The photographer called for immediate family only. Madison's parents stepped into the shot. I stepped back. Dad, Ethan said quietly, maybe we can do some photos later. This is just, you know. I knew. This was the version of his graduation day that would live on social media. The version where his success looked effortless, his family looked perfect, and his father didn't exist. Of course, later. But later never came. I watched from a distance as Ethan worked the crowd like a politician, hugging professors, exchanging contact information with classmates, posing for endless photos. Each photo told the same story. Ethan Carter, successful Stanford graduate, surrounded by equally successful people. No awkward questions about family background. No uncomfortable explanations about money. No embarrassing Uber driver father complicating the narrative. Around 4 p.m., the celebration started winding down. Families were packing up, saying goodbyes, heading to graduation. Dinners at expensive restaurants. I approached Ethan one more time. I should probably head out. Congratulations again. Thanks, Dad. Will I see you this week? Maybe we could celebrate properly. He glanced toward Madison, who was loading gifts into her Porsche. This week's pretty crazy. End of lease. Packing. Job applications. Maybe next week. Maybe next week. The same promise he'd been making for months. Sure, whatever works. I turned to leave, then stopped. Ethan. Yeah. I am proud of you. Really proud. For a moment, his mask slipped. I saw the little boy who used to run to me after soccer games, desperate to know what I thought of his performance. Thanks, Dad. That means a lot. Maybe we could fix this. Maybe graduation day would be a turning point. Then Madison appeared. Babe, we should get going. Dinner reservations at 8. Dinner reservations. The celebration he'd planned without me. Right. See you later, Dad. He hugged me quickly, the first physical affection he'd shown me in months, and walked away. I stood alone on Stanford's campus, watching my son celebrate his graduation with everyone except the person who'd made it possible. That's when I realized something had to change. Not maybe, not eventually, now. The call came Tuesday morning. Mr. Carter, this is Dr. Laura Chen from Stanford. Could you join us for a special announcement at Friday's alumni reception? What kind of announcement, Laura? We're unveiling the new scholarship plaque. Your $750,000 contribution deserves proper recognition. Friday, 3 days after Ethan's graduation. Perfect timing. Will there be media present? Local press? Yes. And about 250 attendees, faculty, major donors, prominent alumni, the kind of crowd that appreciates significant philanthropy. I'll be there. Wonderful. Oh, and James, your son Ethan is invited too. Recent graduates are always welcome at donor events. I could hear the smile in Laura's voice. She knew exactly what she was doing. Friday arrived gray and drizzly. Typical Bay Area November weather. The reception was in Stanford's faculty club, an elegant venue that screamed old money and older traditions. I arrived early, wearing my best suit. Navy blue, custom-tailored, the kind wealthy tech executives wear to board meetings. Amazing how clothes change perception. Laura found me immediately. James, you look distinguished. Thanks for organizing this, Laura. My pleasure. The scholarship fund has helped 48 students already. Your generosity is changing lives. Around us, Stanford's elite mingled over wine and conversation. I recognized faces from tech companies, law firms, medical practices. The kind of crowd Ethan desperately wanted to join. At 6:30, Ethan arrived with Madison. He wore a black cocktail dress I'd never seen before, probably new, probably expensive, probably charged to my credit card. He looked stunning and completely out of place among people 20 years older and infinitely more accomplished. "Dad." He spotted me across the room, surprise clear in his voice. "What are you doing here?" "I was invited to a Stanford donor event." "To a Stanford donor event?" Madison appeared, looking confused. "Mr. Carter, I didn't expect to see you here." Small world. Ethan's eyes darted around the room, calculating. This was his nightmare scenario. His embarrassing father contaminating his Stanford network event. "Dad, maybe we should." "Ladies and gentlemen." Laura's voice cut through the crowd. "If I could have your attention for a special presentation." A podium appeared, spotlights activated, the casual reception transformed into a formal ceremony. "Tonight, we recognize extraordinary generosity that embodies Stanford's commitment to accessible education." Ethan and Madison moved closer, probably hoping to network with whoever was getting honored. "Our scholarship fund has grown tremendously thanks to visionary donors who understand that talent exists regardless of economic background." Polite applause. Ethan was checking his phone, already bored. "This year's major contributor has funded full scholarships for 15 students, young people who might not otherwise have accessed Stanford's opportunities." Now, Ethan was paying attention. 15 full scholarships meant serious money. A contribution of $750,000 from someone who understands both the transformative power of education and the responsibility that comes with success. $750,000. Ethan's head snapped up. "Please join me in recognizing a Stanford Computer Science Advisory Board member, former entrepreneur, and generous philanthropist, James Carter." The room erupted in applause. Ethan's face went white. Every head turned toward me as I walked to the podium. 250 of Stanford's most influential people applauding my generosity. "Thank you, Laura." I took the microphone, looking out at an audience that included my son, his girlfriend, and people whose respect he desperately craved. 5 years ago, I sold my company, Nexus Core Technologies, to Google for $940 million. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ethan gripped Madison's arm. "Success like that comes with responsibility. Stanford gave me the education that made Nexus Core possible. This scholarship fund is my way of ensuring other young entrepreneurs get the same chance." More applause. I could see people in the audience Googling Nexus Core, connecting dots, realizing who I was. But I wasn't finished. These scholarships target first generation college students, kids from working families, young people whose parents drive trucks or wait tables or clean offices. Young people who understand that dignity comes from work, not wealth. The audience was hanging on every word. This was Stanford philanthropy at its finest. Successful alumni giving back with purpose and principle. Because here's what I've learned. Success means nothing if it disconnects you from the people who raised you. Wealth means nothing if it makes you ashamed of where you came from. I looked directly at Ethan. His face was pale, his hands shaking. "The most important lesson I can share is this. Never forget who you were before you became who you are, and never ever be embarrassed by the people who sacrificed to get you here." The applause was thunderous. People were standing, moved by what they thought was abstract wisdom. Only Ethan knew it was personal. Laura returned to the podium. "And now, the unveiling of our recognition plaque." A curtain dropped, revealing a bronze plaque mounted on marble. "The James Carter Scholarship Fund. Established 2024. In recognition of transformative generosity and commitment to educational opportunity, $750,000. Founding contribution." Cameras flashed. People pressed forward to read the inscription. Local news crews captured the moment for tomorrow's broadcast. Ethan stood frozen in the crowd, staring at my name engraved in bronze, mounted permanently on Stanford's campus. That's when Madison recognized me. "Oh my God," she whispered loud. Enough for people nearby to hear. "James Carter, Nexus Core, you're the James Carter." More heads turned. Tech industry veterans were pulling out phones, looking up news articles about the Google acquisition. $940 million, someone said. Largest software acquisition that year. He's been on Forbes lists, advisory Board member here since 2019. Ethan's carefully constructed reality was collapsing in real time. The embarrassing Uber driver father he'd been hiding was actually one of Silicon Valley's most successful entrepreneurs, and everyone at Stanford's most prestigious donor event now knew it. "Madison," he whispered, "we need to leave." But Madison wasn't listening. She was staring at me with new understanding. "Mr. Carter, I had no idea. My dad actually uses Nexus Core architecture in his fund. You're a legend in the industry." "Just a guy who got lucky, Madison." "No, seriously. I pitched a venture capitalist who specifically mentioned your leadership model. You're required reading in Stanford's entrepreneurship program." Ethan tugged at her arm. "Madison, please." But the crowd was closing in. People wanted to shake my hand, discuss the scholarship fund, exchange business cards. I was no longer the invisible Uber driver. I was James Carter, tech entrepreneur, Stanford philanthropist, the man whose generosity was literally carved in stone. And Ethan, he was just another graduate in the crowd watching his father receive the recognition he'd spent 4 years denying him. Monday morning, I made 5 phone calls. The first was to Stanford's bursar office. "This is James Carter. I need to cancel all tuition payments for Ethan Carter, effective immediately." "Mr. Carter, is there a problem with your son's account? He graduated Friday. There shouldn't be any future charges. If there are, don't contact me." "Understood, sir." 1 down. The second call was to Bank of America. "I need to freeze all cards associated with account ending in 5291. That's your son's supplementary card." "That's correct. Effective immediately, sir. He currently has $2,100 in pending charges. How would you like to handle those?" "Decline them all." "All of them?" "Every single one." 3 minutes later, Ethan's spending power disappeared. 4 years of unlimited credit gone. The third call was to Ryan Brooks, my property manager. "Ryan, I need to discuss the tenant at 450 University Avenue, Unit 12A. Ethan Carter, your son. Former tenant Ethan Carter. I'm terminating his lease." "James, you can't just check the lease agreement, Ryan. I'm the guarantor. 30-day notice effective today. This is going to create problems." "That's the point." The fourth call was to Audi Financial Services. "I need to return a leased vehicle immediately. Account holder Ethan Carter. Guarantor James Carter." "Sir, there's still 19 months remaining on the lease. I'm exercising my early termination rights as guarantor. That incurs significant penalties." "I don't care about penalties. I want the car returned by Friday." By noon, Ethan's entire lifestyle infrastructure was dismantled. No Stanford safety net, no unlimited credit, no luxury apartment, no Audi. Everything he'd taken for granted. Gone. My phone started ringing at 12:51 p.m. "Dad, what did you do?" "What do you mean, Ethan?" "My credit card was declined at Rolex. In front of everyone." "That's unfortunate." "Dad, this isn't funny. My card has never been declined." "Maybe you should call the bank." I did call the bank. They said the account was frozen by the primary card holder. "Interesting." "Dad, what is going on?" "You're 24 years old, Ethan. You have a Stanford degree. Maybe it's time you funded your own lifestyle." Silence. "You can't just cut me off." "I'm not cutting you off. I'm setting boundaries. This is insane. I need that credit card." "For what?" For everything. Rent, groceries, gas. You have a job interview this week, right? With that hedge fund. That's not until Thursday, and they might not even. Then I guess you better make a good impression." I hung up. He called back immediately. "Dad, please. We can talk about this. We tried talking, Ethan, for 4 years. You weren't interested. That's not fair." "You're right. It's not fair. It's not fair that I funded a lifestyle you used to exclude me. It's not fair that I paid for an education that taught you to be ashamed of your father. It's not fair that you treated me like an embarrassment while I treated you like a priority." "Dad, I'm done being fair, Ethan. Fair was giving you everything while getting nothing. Fair was pretending your disrespect didn't hurt. Fair was enabling behavior that was turning you into someone I don't recognize." The second wave of consequences hit. Tuesday. Ryan called with an update. He's been to the building 4 times, angry, crying, demanding to speak with the owner. What did you tell him? That lease terminations are non-negotiable. Good. Wednesday brought the Audi situation to a head. Mr. Carter, your son is here, demanding to speak with you about the vehicle return. I was at the Audi dealership signing termination paperwork. Send him over. Ethan appeared moments later, streaked and desperate. Dad, you can't take my car. It's not your car, Ethan. It's a lease in my name. How am I supposed to get around? The same way millions of people do. Public transportation, ride share, walking. Dad, please. I can't show up to job interviews on the bus. Why not? Because it's not professional, appropriate, or just embarrassing. He couldn't answer. Ethan, 3 days ago, you abandoned me on a highway because you were embarrassed by my job. My job that involves driving people who can't afford their own cars. People who take buses and walk and work multiple jobs to survive. That's different. How? Because you chose that. You don't have to. I don't have to what? Work, be useful, stay connected to reality. You could buy anything you want, including respect. That stopped him. Dad, I never said. You never said a lot of things, Ethan. You never said thank you. You never said you were proud of me. You never said you appreciated the sacrifices. You just took everything and gave nothing. The Audi representative approached with paperwork. Sir, everything's complete. The vehicle will be picked up Friday morning. Perfect. I looked at Ethan one last time. You have until Friday to figure out transportation to your job interview. I suggest you start planning. I walked away, leaving him standing in the dealership parking lot. For the first time in 4 years, I felt like a father instead of an ATM. The social media implosion started. Within hours, Ethan's Instagram account, 91,000 followers built on a foundation of luxury lifestyle content, became a liability overnight. Designer clothes, expensive dinners, luxury trips, all funded by the embarrassing Uber driver he'd spent 4 years hiding. His followers weren't stupid. When news of the Stanford scholarship broke, complete with photos of me at the podium, they connected the dots fast. Wait, your dad is James Carter? The James Carter from Nexus Core? Boy, you've been posting about shopping while your dad was donating $750,000 to charity. This is embarrassing. He was ashamed of a tech billionaire. The comments kept coming. Screenshots spread across Reddit, Twitter, TikTok. Stanford students who knew Ethan started sharing stories. He literally told people his dad was unemployed. I saw his dad picking up DoorDash orders and felt bad for him. Turns out he's worth more than all our parents combined. Imagine being this ungrateful. By Thursday, his follower count had dropped to 9,000. Brands that had been interested in sponsorship deals disappeared. His carefully curated influencer identity collapsed under the weight of revealed hypocrisy, but the social consequences were just the beginning. Madison called Wednesday night. Ethan, we need to talk. If this is about the scholarship thing, it's about everything. The lies, the attitude, the way you treated your father. You don't understand the situation. I understand perfectly. Your dad is one of the most respected entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. He's been on my vision board since college and you convinced me he was some kind of failure. I never said he was a failure. You said he was embarrassing. You made me believe your family had no money, no connections, no influence. Do you realize how that makes me look? Ethan was quiet. My parents are mortified. They're major Stanford donors and we completely disrespected one of the university's biggest benefactors. My dad is worried this could affect our family's reputation. So this is about your reputation? This is about character, Ethan. I can't be with someone who treats family like that. She ended it that night. The job interview Thursday went exactly as expected. Hedge fund, entry-level analyst. Position, $48,000 starting salary. The interviewer seemed impressed. Until the conversation turned personal. I see you graduated from Stanford. That's expensive. How did your family manage the costs? Ethan tried to deflect. Student loans, scholarships, you. No. Actually, I was at the scholarship reception Friday night. Wasn't your father the major donor they honored? The interview ended shortly after. Friday morning brought new challenges. Without a car, Ethan had to take Uber to apartment viewings. The irony wasn't lost on him, riding in cars driven by people exactly like the father he'd been ashamed of. Looking at a lot of places today? His driver asked. Yeah, unfortunately. Rent's crazy expensive around here. I'm working 2 jobs just to afford a studio in San Bruno. 2 jobs. Ethan thought about his father's 2 jobs, retired tech executive and Uber driver, and wondered for the first time which one was the choice and which one was the purpose. The apartment search was brutal. Without my co-signature, without proof of income, without established credit, he was effectively homeless. In one of America's most expensive housing markets. We need first month, last month, and security deposit, landlords kept saying, plus proof of income at 3 times the monthly rent. Ethan had none of those things. He ended up at his roommate Cole's couch Friday night trying to figure out what came next. Maybe you should call your dad, Cole suggested. I can't. Why not? Because he was right. That was the moment Ethan finally understood what he'd lost. Not just money, respect. Not just lifestyle, relationship. Not just comfort, character. Saturday brought an unexpected visitor. Dr. Laura Chen called Ethan directly. I wanted you to know how proud your father was at graduation. He spoke about you constantly during advisory board meetings. He did. He called you brilliant, ambitious, everything he hoped you'd become. We all assumed you two were very close. We used to be. Ethan, your father structured the scholarship fund specifically to help students like you. First-generation college prospects. Kids whose parents work regular jobs but dream big dreams. He said he wanted to make sure other parents could give their children opportunities without losing their children's respect. The message was clear. James Carter had created a scholarship for people who wouldn't be ashamed of their parents. Dr. Chen, is there any way to fix this? That's between you and your father. But I will say this, in 30 years at Stanford, I've never met a parent more proud or more heartbroken. Sunday afternoon, Ethan sat in a coffee shop in Redwood City using free Wi-Fi to apply for jobs online. His laptop was 3 years old. His phone was about to be cut off, and his last $25 had bought him a small coffee he was nursing for hours. At the next table, a father helped his teenage son with college applications. Don't worry about the costs, buddy. We'll figure it out. Education is the most important investment we can make. Ethan watched them work together. No shame, no embarrassment, just a parent supporting a child's dreams. That's when he finally understood what he'd thrown away. His father hadn't been driving Uber because he had to. He'd been driving Uber because he wanted to stay connected to real people facing real challenges. He'd been trying to teach him about humility, empathy, and genuine human connection. Instead, he'd learned entitlement, image management, and conditional love. The man he'd treated as emergency contact number 2 had been contact 1 all along. The person funding his dreams, supporting his goals, and hoping desperately that success wouldn't change who he was. But it had changed him into someone who measured worth in followers and status and shame. Someone who could stand in a crowd of Stanford's elite and feel embarrassed by the person who'd made his presence there possible. The worst part wasn't losing the money. It was realizing he'd lost himself. The knock came Sunday evening. I was reading in my living room, the modest Los Altos house that Ethan had always seen as evidence of failure. When I heard the soft tapping on my front door, through the peephole, I saw him. No Audi in the driveway, no designer outfit, just my son, looking smaller and younger than he had in years. I opened the door. Hi, Dad. Ethan, can we talk? I stepped aside to let him in. He looked around the house like he was seeing it for the first time. The comfortable furniture, the family photos, the Stanford memorabilia I'd never thrown away despite his indifference. I took 4 buses to get here, he said quietly. That must have been challenging. It was, but I met some interesting people. A nursing student working nights to pay for school. A single dad going to community college. People who reminded me of someone. He sat on the couch where he used to do homework back when we still talked. Dad, I owe you an apology. You owe yourself more than you owe me. I don't understand. Ethan, I could forgive you tomorrow? Write you a check, fix all your problems, pretend this never happened. But what would that teach you? That actions don't have consequences? That respect is optional? That love means never holding people accountable? He was quiet for a long moment. I saw the scholarship plaque, the James Carter Scholarship Fund. What did you think? I thought about all the students who will benefit from it. First-generation college kids whose parents work regular jobs but dream big dreams. Kids who won't be ashamed of where they came from. That was the goal. Dad, why didn't you tell me about Nexus Core, about the money, about everything? Because I wanted you to love me for who I was, not what I had. I wanted to see if success would make you a better person or just a different person. And you became someone I didn't recognize. Someone who confused wealth with worth, status with character, image with identity. Ethan started crying. Not the frustrated tears of someone who wasn't getting their way, but the deep, painful tears of someone finally understanding what they'd lost. I ruined everything, didn't I? You made choices. We all make choices. Can I fix this? That depends. What would fixing this look like to you? He wiped his eyes, thinking. I got the job at the hedge fund. $48,000 a year, entry level, but it's honest work. That's a start. I found a studio apartment in San Mateo. 750 square feet, $1,800 a month. I can barely afford it, but it's mine. How will you get to work? Bus and Caltrain. An hour and 20 each way, but lots of people do it. I nodded, waiting. Dad, I don't want your money anymore. I want to earn what I have. I want to understand what you were trying to teach me, which was what? That dignity comes from work, not wealth. That respect is earned, not bought. That the most important relationships are built on character, not comfort. And how will I know you've learned that? He took a deep breath. Because I'm going to start over. Build a life I can be proud of, not just a life that looks good on Instagram. Make friends who like me for who I am, not what I can afford. Find someone who respects my values, not my credit limit. What about us? I want to earn back your respect. Not through apologies, but through actions. I want to show you that the son you raised is still in here somewhere. I looked at this young man, my son, sitting in my living room, finally understanding what I'd been trying to teach him for years. Ethan, I never stopped loving you. But love without boundaries isn't love, it's enabling. So, what happens now? Now you figure out who you are when nobody's funding your lifestyle. You discover what you're capable of. When you can't rely on my credit card, you learn whether the person you've become is someone you actually want to be. And if I prove myself, if I show you I've changed, then we rebuild our relationship slowly based on mutual respect instead of financial dependence. He stood to leave, pausing at the door. Dad, I'm proud of you. Nexus Core, the scholarship fund, everything you've accomplished. I should have said that years ago. Thank you, Ethan. That means everything. After he left, I sat in my quiet house, thinking about second chances and hard lessons and the difference between helping someone and enabling them. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful. Not because I'd won some battle against my son, but because I'd finally given him the chance to win the battle for himself. If you're watching this, I'd love to know, where do you draw the line between supporting family and enabling bad behavior? Let me know in the comments below.